I'm Bradley.
And I'm Brendan.
And on today's episode of Story Proof, we are talking about the film Space Cowboys from the year 2000.
And honest to God, we might be the first ones.
Aww.
I mean, seriously, I YouTube searched this thing before we watched it, and there's nothing except like the trailer, and then they have like those movie clip pages on YouTube that clip like specific scenes from movies.
Yeah.
That's literally all that I found about this movie.
And that's such a shame, because this is such a charming movie.
It's fun. It's a good movie. It's, like you said, it's charming. Clint Eastwood directed it and starred in it, and it's got a great cast.
Great cast. Interesting concept.
Yeah.
Like, it's sort of a bit of a twist on some of the regular stuff, and a lot of the movie, a lot of the plot points and character things, pretty predictable, but they're so good, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I just enjoy this movie.
Yeah.
I will say this is one of the earliest movies I remember seeing in theaters. I distinctly remember going to see this movie with my dad at a very, very young age.
This one is just one I caught like on HBO one day. I think my dad was watching it or something. You get hooked by it, man. Like it's just genuinely a good movie.
It's so good. It's so much fun. It's again, the concept on paper is so simple with a twist, but really it's the main four guys. You've got Clint Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, Donald Sutherland, and James Garner.
Yeah.
You could not have cast a more perfect group of guys for this movie.
Oh yeah, it's a great group of four. Those guys work off of each other so well with each other, and
I will say especially Clint Eastwood and Tommy Lee Jones.
Oh yeah.
You meet these characters when they're in their prime. These guys, they're young, they are cutting edge, trying to get into space, and then we pick up with them like 40 years later, I think. Yeah. So it's interesting to see. That's a hard thing to do from a writing standpoint and from an acting standpoint when you're playing an older version of an already established character, and they do such a good job of all of the personality traits, everything you see in the beginning. When you pick up with them 40 years later, you're like, yes, absolutely, this is an older version of that character I saw. They sound the same, but they dub over their voices, so of course they're gonna sound the same.
Yeah,
it's a good fucking dub, dude. I think it's good.
It goes into Uncanny Valley for me.
Now that is fair. I think it's dubbed so well that like the first time I watched it, I didn't know. I mean, I was a kid, but
so basically what happens is in the opening part of the scene, you're taking, like Bradley said, you got the younger people and you have younger actors portraying all the characters, but they've made the decision to take Clint Eastwood's voice and Tommy Lee Jones's voice and Donald Sutherland's voice and James Garner's voice, and they put them over the acting of the young actors.
Yeah.
But they don't in any way change their inflections or their or the tone of their voice to like de-age the voice. So it's just, 2000s Clint Eastwood and 2000s Tommy Lee Jones coming out of 1950s young guys, and it's just it's off-putting and it throws me off a little bit.
The only one that gets me is Cromwell. James Cromwell. I'm like, dude, you have sounded 8,000 years old since the dawn of time. You just don't sound young.
But part of that is because they all have such distinct voices.
Now that's fair.
To them. Like, all of these guys have very distinct voices, especially Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, James Cromwell has a very distinctive voice.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It drives Uncanny Valley to me in a way.
I love it.
And I like the idea of it. I like trying it. I think I would have just gone with the younger actors, let the actors do that, and then age them up the way we'd have in movies for 100 years.
I like it. No notes. I think it's great. It is a little weird, but the one where it always gets me is when Tommy Lee Jones is like, "Woo, 7,000 feet." I'm like, okay, this is a little weird.
Yeah,
because that is where you're like, there is no other voice in the world you're going to confuse that one with.
Yeah,
but it is. I think it's good. And yeah, it is really cool that we do get to see them at the start, and because of what their story focuses on, it really is like we see them up to a certain point. NASA is a thing now. They're not going to go up into into space, and then when we pick up with them 40 years later, a lifetime has happened in between.
Yeah.
But as soon as these guys get together, it's like they pick up absolutely right where they left off. It's good. It's good storytelling. It's just really fucking good. So yeah, we mentioned Clint Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, Donald Sutherland, and James Garner. They are like the four big guys in this. We do have James Cromwell in this as well. We do also have William Devane in this. Since we always go out of our way to mention a West Wing tie-in,
he's our weekly West Wing cameo.
Yeah, James Cromwell as well.
Yeah,
also is in an episode of the West Wing.
Yeah,
fuck yeah, dude.
We got two of them in this episode.
The entire world is just the degrees of separation from the West Wing.
Yeah, we're gonna start a game. It's gonna be not the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's gonna be the 7 degrees of West Wing. And it's just gonna be okay. How many degrees are between this actor and the West Wing?
Yeah, that's fair. Marcia Gay Harden in this as well. I'm trying to think of like what I mostly know her for. I know her from The Mist.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Mrs. Carmody is like the thing I know her from.
I was gonna say that's probably the thing you know her most from. It's honestly the thing I know her most from because she gives such a great performance in The Mist. She's been all over the place though over the years. She was in the film Mona Lisa Smile. Some people might know that.
Sure.
She was a guest star in The Newsroom. Hey, another Aaron Sorkin.
Hey, now we're doing good.
Now we got the Sorkin verse. But she's been in so many things. She was actually, here's a connection to you. She was in the film version of the Spitfire Grill that the musical you did was based on.
All I ever heard about that when we were doing it was don't watch it. Just don't. It's horrible. Don't watch it.
Oh, she was Robin Williams' love interest in Flubber.
Yep, I haven't watched that in 20 years. But yeah, she's in this, and she does have she's a romantic partner for Tommy Lee Jones, and it is interesting because when you see it in the movie, you're like, there's clearly an age difference. It's not as extreme as I thought. There's 13-year difference between them.
Yeah.
Just because of the fact that they're portrayed as like the older guys in this.
Yeah.
So, they've got a love interest thing going on there. There's another guy. Okay, I'm going to let you pronounce his name because I can't do this one.
Yeah. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it wrong. I'm going to do the best I can. Rade Sarabajia. Basically, if you have seen a movie or a television show where you needed a guy who looked vaguely Eastern European or Russian, you probably saw this guy.
Oh yeah, he's been in everything.
He is like the very definition of character actor.
Yeah,
like I think of him most from Mighty Joe Young.
That keeps blowing my mind that's the first one you say because I can constantly forget he was in that.
He's the bad guy in Mighty Joe Young, the one with Charlize Theron.
Sure.
And Bill Paxton.
See, I know him. If you've seen Shooter, there was the guy, the Russian dude who was in the wheelchair. Yeah, the Russian dude in that. He is the Russian dude in Taken 2. That's the bad guy who's going after Homeboy for killing his son.
Yeah.
He is the Russian homeless guy that gets a coat from Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins. He is the Russian guy in the Russian military in Lord of War. He is the Russian guy in the Russian military in X-Men First Class. Are you seeing a trend? Because guess who he is in this fucking movie? He's the Russian dude in the Russian military.
As I said, if you need somebody who looks and sounds vaguely Russian and Eastern European, he's your guy.
I thoroughly enjoy him.
He is
like I'm laughing a lot. I enjoy the hell out of him and everything that I just mentioned. And then the only other two people that we do have in this, I will say these are two people I was not familiar with, but we do have Lauren Dean is playing Ethan Glantz, and then we do also have Courtney B. Vance as Roger Hines. So whenever we get to the point where they are going up in the spaceship, there are 6 people in it. It's the 4 older guys and 2 younger guys.
Yeah. So
for this, Roger and Ethan are the 2 younger guys. Surprisingly small cast, actually. There are a lot of parts of this that were filmed on location at 2 different places. One of them is the Kennedy Space Center that's in Florida, which we've been there.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Johnson Space Center in Texas, and then there's the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. Honestly, for CGI in this, I don't know if maybe it's because it's just in the backdrop of space and maybe you can get by with a lot more.
Yeah.
Honestly, for CGI, most of it's really good. There's only one or two moments where I'm like, this looks a little goofy, and both of them involve CGI-ing a person.
Yeah.
Like when you get body movement, literally when he straps himself onto the front
Onto
of
the
the thing,
rockets,
I'm like, that looks dumb.
Yeah, it looks like a puppet just
Yeah.
around. Yeah, for the most part, it's good. It always helps when you have darker backgrounds because it helps to hide the CGI a bit more. That's part of why, like, the T-Rex sequences in Jurassic Park work so well.
Yeah.
Is because you have the darkness to kind of just shroud the CGI together. It helps it blend in a bit better.
Yeah.
Especially early CGI. Which this isn't early. This is, 2000. So it's not.
This is peak when it's about to start getting weird. This movie also had a budget of around $60 million, and then the box office for it was about $130 million. So I would say a success. I know usually they say 2.5 times to 3 times is really what you want, but for a movie to come out early 2000s to make $130 million in the box office, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And this movie is not talked about by a whole lot of people.
Yeah, like I said, nothing as far as I could tell on YouTube. You probably have to deep dive to find something.
I like it. I always remember seeing it when I was younger, and then just kind of rediscovering it when I was a bit older. I was like, oh my god, I remember going to see this with my dad.
Yeah.
So I thoroughly enjoy this movie, and there are like I said, a few plot points we've already talked about that you're going to hear us talk about again, because really the movie has 3 sections. You've got the first chunk of it that is them you're introduced to the characters. You've got the flashback sequence. Then you meet the characters. It's getting Team Daedalus together. Yeah. Then you've got the middle section of them training to go to space. Then you got the third section. Holy shit, they're in space. So it pretty much flows a lot of it. I'm not going to lie. I usually try to write notes down when I'm watching movies for this. Most of my notes are just fucking amazing one-liners that these guys have. This is such a funny fucking movie. It kills me.
Yeah.
And these guys, these 4 guys in particular, dude, they do such a good job of their characters are so consistent throughout the film. Yeah. All the mannerisms, the funny things they've got, they're so fucking good. I love this movie. Go watch this movie. Go fucking watch this movie. It's so fucking good. I love this movie. It's a good time. It's a good time. But yeah, I mean, when the movie starts out, so we do have, there are 4 guys in total. So this is Frank, Hawk, Tank, and Jerry.
Yeah.
So even immediately we get an idea that one of them is on the ground. Mm-hmm. He's looking at a Playboy being like, ooh, yeah. So already all right, the horny one, got it. That does not go away with age.
No.
He is so fucking funny in this movie. But he's down. I think there's even a few things where he talks about, you could tell he's more on the engineer side. He's more on the I create things type side. He's not as much of the pilot.
Yeah.
Then there's another guy who is Tank that's got a little hula dancer that's up in his thing. I think he's flying like a freaking, I can't remember the name of the airplane. It was one of these giant ones.
Yeah.
And so he's a pilot as well. But then the 2 guys in the fighter jet. So we've got the Clint Eastwood character and the Tommy Lee Jones character, because at this point they're not played by them, just voiced by them. So it is,
so weird.
Hawk and Frank, they're going up, and they are basically just flying straight the fuck up. And they're trying to push this test plane to see how high up it can get. And then Frank is saying, okay, we pushed it far enough. Let's go ahead and go. And Hawk's like, absolutely. And then just keeps going. He doesn't even hide it. He just keeps fucking going.
Yeah, so we're getting very clear character as to who these guys are.
Oh yeah, fucking immediately. I just thought a Boeing Super Fortress is the one that was driven by Tank. Damn, I was like, the fucking Boeing B-50. Fuck,
yeah.
I knew the name of it. This thing, it's just a fucking platform.
Yeah.
With propellers. It's just fucking huge. But yeah, so they go up and he's pushing it. The plane stalls and they have to fucking bug out, and they almost get hit by the Boeing. When they land, Hawk is cheering, woo, yeah, whatever he says, 18,000 feet, now I feel great, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And Frank just comes up, fucking punches him right in the face. So then by the time the other 2 guys get there, I mean, they're fighting. They're, going to town on each other. You can tell immediately from conversation, this is not the first time this has happened. This is not the second time this has happened.
No. and they do such a great job of setting up just the personalities of these two characters, especially how Hawk is the guy that's going to push the limits and willing to take more risks, and Frank's just the guy who's trying to go as by the book as possible, but is very surly and not easy to like get along with.
Yeah, they are both ridiculously competitive as well.
Yeah.
So, in a real world, they would be really good for each other.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate that every time they fuck up with this and they lose a plane, that's a super expensive fucking...
Yeah, all this time you get like brief cutbacks to James Cromwell's character as a younger man, Bob Gerson.
Gerson.
He's their commanding officer. Basically, he's kind of in charge of their entire operation as it is. And so he brings Frank and Hawk in and gives them that traditional reprimand of, hey, you guys are destroying
please stop wrecking my expensive fucking airplanes, please.
Yeah. And like Hawk's real proud of himself and Frank's like,
yeah,
we shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
All the meantime, we know that through the flight, their ambition, they get up into the upper atmosphere, so they're looking at the moon, they're looking at space, and they're like, okay, we're in the running to be the first astronauts, we're going to walk up there one day. And so Bob brings them all out to this big press conference to announce, hey, NASA's getting created, we've got our first set of astronauts, and it's none of these guys.
Yeah, he's like, let me introduce you to the first American that's going to be in space. And he turns to Frank and he's like, Frank, can you move back? And then a fucking like monkey comes out and he's like, this is going to be the first American in space.
They bring out a chimpanzee. The chimpanzee holds out her hand to Frank and he's like,
yeah,
hold her hand, Frank.
Yeah, and Gerson's like, take her hand, Frank. I'd have killed him on stage right there.
And then that's basically the end of the opening. We cut to 40 some odd years later, and all of a sudden, Gerson is he's not like higher up at NASA, but he's a project manager at NASA.
He's pretty high up, and he's on some level of first name basis with the head of the space program, also known as the Vice President of the United States.
Yeah.
So he is pretty up there. You can tell he's been there for quite some time. They start having conversations about a Russian satellite named Icon that is losing its gravitational level, so it's degrading, so it's coming down towards Earth.
Yeah, eventually it's going to just crash somewhere on Earth if it's not fixed, and we find out that it's the guidance system that's malfunctioned.
Yeah, and they start looking at the guidance system, and they're like, what the fuck? This thing is like so ancient. None of us know how to fix it. None of us know how to work it. Yeah. And they're like, what do we do? And Gerson's like, hell, I know who made the damn thing.
Yeah.
And I think someone's like, is he still alive? And he's like, not if I'm lucky.
Yeah, so they find out that on this Soviet-era communications satellite, there's a American guidance system that was meant for the Skylab, which was the satellite precursor to what we now have in the International Space Station.
Yeah.
And the big question is, how did a American-designed guidance system get onto a Soviet satellite
in the peak of the Cold War?
In the peak of the Cold War, exactly.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, that's going to be a minor subplot. Gerson sends Marcia Gay Harden and Lauren Dean, their characters, to go hunt down Frank.
Yeah.
Who is now played by Clint Eastwood.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now we're officially into the older characters playing the older characters.
Yeah.
When they happen upon him, it's a very funny scene, and it's also very cute.
Yeah.
I really like it when you have a scene where it's like a married couple that is clear they've been married for a while, and they just still have like cute moments with each other.
Yeah.
So this one, he was an engineer. He has a PhD. He's a very smart person. He's in the garage putting together like an electric garage door.
Yeah.
And his wife's just chastising him the whole time. You can tell it's like in a friendly back and forth way.
You should read the directions, Frank.
Yeah, and he's like, the guy in China who wrote this had it translated by an Englishman who then had it translated by a Chinese man who had to make sure it was checked. He's like, they don't even know what they're talking about. So then he gets the door closed. He can't get it back open.
Well,
she's like, did you put batteries in the remote?
Yeah.
He's like, no, I didn't read that far. So then they're stuck in the garage, and immediately he's like, oh, since I got you all here to myself, why don't I put you on top of the washing machine and spin you around a few rounds or whatnot. And they're starting to kind of like mess around a little bit, and the fucking garage door opens, and it's the two people from NASA outside,
and they just are awkwardly standing there, like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
So they get invited in, and they debrief Frank about the situation with the satellite, and he questions why his guidance system is on the Russian satellite in the first place, and Lauren Dean's character, I can't remember his name. Ethan. Basically says that's not our primary concern at this time. Our concern is just getting it fixed so that it can go back into orbit. And
they also bring him like plans and layouts, and they kind of expect him to be like, this, replace this chip.
Yeah, it's just an easy fix if you look at this blueprint and stuff.
Yeah,
but Frank doesn't have anything really to offer them. He doesn't want to.
Yeah,
really.
At first he tells him to fuck off.
Yeah, as soon as he learns that Gerson is a part of this whole thing, he's like, get out of my house.
Yeah.
And Lauren Dean, as he's leaving the house, gives him one last little jab about how he washed out at NASA, not because Gerson screwed Team Daedalus over like Frank thinks, but because Frank wasn't a team player, and that's why he wasn't able to get things done.
And that exact phrase is used against him at least 2 or 3 more times in this movie.
So, after that, he and his wife have a bit of a heart-to-heart, and his wife basically convinces him, hey, you need to go help with this thing. Nobody else can do it anyway, so you might as well.
Yeah. So, then he goes into the big bad NASA headquarters, and he goes to talk to Gerson, and he's like, I'll do it on one condition. He's like, what? And I was like, I can't train one of your people how to do this. I have to be up there to do it, and I'm not going unless you send all of Team Daedalus up. And Gerson's like, haha, no, y'all are old. And he's like, haha, cool, I know, but we're going anyway. Fuck. So he does agree. We do find out later that he was never planning on sending them, but spoiler alert, that doesn't work out well for him.
Yeah, the Russian general is like, how can you send these people up into space?
Yeah, so we should say that the person whose name I can't pronounce that we mentioned earlier, he is there the whole time, and there are so many moments where you can tell something sketchy is going on. He said they have some back and forth between he and Gerson. You can tell there's some insider information that we do not know about what's going on. So you can tell there's something going on, because even a few people then say like, okay, it's falling, just let it fall, like it's just a communications satellite. And then the general says, well, if it falls it could cripple us. And the guy who's in charge of I'm not entirely sure what he's in charge of, but it is the flight director. Okay.
Yeah, he's the head of the flight.
Gene. He even says like, why don't you just let it fall? If we do, it'll cripple us. He's like, really? One communication satellite would cripple all of you? And the Russian was like, yes. And he's like, huh. Interesting.
And then they question at the same time why they can't just send a regular crew up with a space shuttle to grab the thing, dock it into the shuttle bay, and then bring it back to ground safely.
To fix it and then put it back.
And it's too big to actually bring in and bring it down.
And then Gene even was like, too big for the space shuttle? And the guy's like, yes. And that's it. He's like, huh. You can tell he is not believing a fucking word this dude is saying.
And you and I have seen the size of the space shuttle docking bay.
Yeah.
Like, that thing's huge.
Yeah. So, he does say that I'll go up if you send all of Team Daedalus. Gerson says, fine. So he's like, all right, now I got to go recruit people. So the first one that he goes to recruit is Tank. We see that Tank is, I guess, like a Baptist preacher?
Yeah, it's not really clear what denomination he is. He's just a preacher.
He's not good at it. God bless him. He's trying to like talk through. He's got a very small congregation. I do like that even while he's up there and he's doing the preaching, he goes like drop something and he picks up and you can see he's still got his tattoos on his arms.
Yeah.
He does still have the little hula girl down there with him.
Yeah.
And he looks out in the open church area and all of a sudden he sees Frank out there. And then his sermon immediately changes to talk about the 4 of them. You're like, oh, he's still passionate about this. He enjoys it. So then they talk, and Frank is like, we're going up into space. You got to come with me. And Tank's like, I have to pray about this. And Frank's is like, okay. Can you pray faster? Can you make it quick?
I'm consulting from on high.
And he does. He like holds his hands up. He's like, I'm consulting up on high. And he tells me, why the hell not? He goes and shakes his hand. So like, all right, this is good.
Yeah.
So then he goes to recruit Jerry. So in the beginning, Tank was the one that was flying the Boeing.
Yeah.
Jerry is the one who was on the ground, is the more engineer side. So when we see Jerry, he's riding a roller coaster. And at first you're like, oh, he's just riding a roller coaster. He's eating a banana while riding the roller coaster.
Yeah.
And he's talking into like a dictaphone. And he's talking about like the turns and the spin and this and that. So you're like, okay, so he's like a professional engineer. He's working on this.
He designs roller coasters.
Yeah. And then while he's up there, now keep in mind, again, these guys, age-wise, is pretty up there.
Yeah. They're probably in, what I'd say there's
60s or 70s in this.
Yeah.
Kind of changes for some of them.
Yeah.
But Frank is down on the bottom, and he's standing next to a girl that's got to be in like her 20s or 30s. Like, she's young. And he's like, oh, is that your dad up there? And she says something like, yeah, that's my daddy, all right, or something like.
He says something about how her father is very skilled.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, oh, he's skilled, all right.
Yep. And then when Jerry comes off the thing, he sees her and is like, oh, hey, babe. And then they like passionately kiss, and you're like, oh, that's not what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then Jerry and Tank are both very happy to see Frank, so you can tell it's been a while since these guys have interacted with each other.
Yeah.
And he says, like, oh, it's so great to see you. He gives him like a folder, a piece of paper. Jerry pulls out these giant fucking glasses. It's the one. It's the old person glasses.
Yeah, like classic Coke bottle.
Oh yeah,
things.
big frames. The lenses are like 8 inches thick, and
Yeah.
he's doing that. And he's like, oh, so he pretty much immediately says yes.
Yeah.
So then he's got to go recruit Hawk.
And we learn that he and Hawk haven't talked in a while.
I think they say like 20 years.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
So we cut to Utah, and there's this we're at this like little field, and this young couple, this guy, it's his birthday, and he wants to get some crazy ride in a corn what is it, a crop duster.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word I'm looking for, crop duster. And so he goes to a couple of guys that are just sitting on a porch, and he's like, can you guys give me a crazy ride? And one of them, who I think is John Hamm, by the way,
we saw that John Hamm was in this movie, and he plays like young pilot, and I'm like, who the fuck? When was he in this movie? If he was, it's got to be one of these two guys.
I'm pretty sure it's one of these guys. But they're like, we don't do that kind of flying here. And the young kid who's looking for the ride is like, is there anybody who does? Do you know anybody who does? And they point him around the corner to another area, and Hawk's just like chilling in like a chair. I guess maybe he was sleeping at the time.
He's got his like cowboy hat pulled down, so I think he just wanted to look dramatic.
Yeah. So he asked him if he'll give him the ride, and he says it's his birthday, and Hawk's just like, happy birthday.
I think he says something like, I want to like shit my brains out or something.
Yeah.
He says something along those lines, and Hawk's like, okay.
Happy birthday. And then smash cut to this guy just freaking out,
screaming in this plane.
It's so good. It's so funny.
Yeah.
And Hawk's just doing all this crazy flying and everything else. The guy actually pukes himself.
Oh my god. And Hawk's behind him, so it hits him and it hits his little windshield in front of him.
Yeah.
So Hawk like reaches up and is like wiping vomit off of the. I'd throw him out of the plane right then.
I mean, it must not be it can't be the first time it's happened.
Well, he also covers for him a bit later, which is really nice.
It's nice. Yeah, they land and he...
And by the way, we said kid. This guy, he's probably like 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just hit me. I was like, we said kid. I imagine like 12.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. He's like 20 years old.
Yeah.
So he they get back on the ground, and he's like woozily getting out of the plane. I think he falls onto the ground or something as he tries to step out.
Yeah.
And
He's apologizing for throwing up. He's like, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. And then at first, Hawk is kind of like upset about it, but then he starts like cleaning him up.
yeah, because he sees the girlfriend walking
Yeah.
over to come say hello, and
And
see
he
what's
tries to
going
help
on.
him save face.
And he's like, "Oh, he did great up there." So like,
you
okay,
really,
Hawk,
you really
I
got your
see you.
wings today.
Okay, Hawk, I see you. Good job.
Yeah.
I like it.
He's probably my favorite.
Yeah,
Not Jerry's pretty. Oh no, Tank. God, they're all so good.
they're all great. And then so those guys, the couple walks off, and then this is when Frank walks up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, Hawk has his back to him, and he's like, I think he just says like hello, and you can just see Hawk just kind of like
just he sighs his like the visible distaste at
Yeah.
this moment now.
Yeah, you can fucking tell these guys are not on speaking terms. They go back and forth a little bit. Gives him the sales pitch. Team Daedalus is going up. He doesn't believe him at first, and the whole time, like, he's cleaning like vomit off of his airplane.
Yeah,
And then he goes up to where the rotor is up front, and he kind of cleans it a little bit there. And then they basically part at that point, saying, you know, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this. So they leave, and Hawk says, like, give my best to Jenny, maybe.
yeah,
Or-
Frank's wife.
Yeah. And then Frank says, yeah, give my best to
Your wife.
Yeah. And
basically.
that's when he's like, she died. Hawk
Yeah.
says that his wife died, I think, like 10, 15 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And then
Frank's like, I didn't know that.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's the first moment of softening we've seen between them.
Yeah.
Is him being like, oh well, I didn't know that, and I can't remember the line. I should have written the line down. I remember he has a good line about like, how could you know, or you didn't want to know, or something.
Yeah.
So then he leaves, and I think maybe he says that I'm gonna go meet the boys over at such and such diner or whatnot.
Yeah, down the road. And
Yeah.
so Frank's like, okay, he's not coming along, and he's driving down the road. All of a sudden, this truck comes speeding past him, just going crazy, speeds around him, and just kind of drives off in front of him. Frank seems to not know that it's Hawk,
Yeah.
but
Well, it's behind him at first, and he
Yeah.
looks up, and you can't see in the windshield.
yeah. But I mean, if I'm Frank in that moment, I'm like, okay, that has Hawk written on it. Even if I haven't seen him for 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
like, that's classic vintage Hawk,
Yeah.
just based on what I know. But so Frank walks into the diner and sees Jerry and Tank sitting there,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, nah, he's still the same stubborn old mule he's ever always been.
And then you hear Tommy Lee Jones' voice, and you still drive slower than a grandma on her way to church. He turns around, and there he is. It's one of that I think is the first one-liner that I'm like, that actively made me laugh out loud.
Yeah.
Like, we're about to get just one after another for a while.
Yeah,
too.
it's a good one.
Yeah, because at this point, I mean, Team Daedalus is together. They're at the NASA Training Center, and the deal that Gerson gave him is, I will only do it if you let one of my men shadow you, so
Yeah.
that they can learn how to fix it in replacement. If you die, and all of your team members have to pass the physical requirements.
Yeah.
These guys are old. Two of them are in pretty good shape.
It's funny that they make such a big deal about them being old. I get that a couple of them aren't like necessarily in the best of shape. Like they haven't been actively like working out and preparing to go into space. But this is 2 years after they sent 77-year-old John Glenn up on the space shuttle.
Yeah, that
when
is
the movie came out.
fair chunk older than any of these guys would have been.
So I mean, I don't know what kind of preparation John Glenn went into to go up into space. I didn't look that far into it. It's just funny that that's a plot point because that happened in real life.
Yeah. They do meet. They do happen upon Marcia Gay Harden's character, and she says something. She's giving like a bit of a tour to a group of kids that are there, and she mentions that if you hit a baseball to the moon, all you have to do is get it halfway, because then when you get into the moon's gravitational force, it'll carry it the rest of the way. That comes into play later.
Yep.
But immediately, Hawk is like throwing lovey-dovey eyes at her. Immediately.
Yeah.
So they do mention the idea about the person who used to be there that was like in her job, and they're like, "Oh my God, such and such, how is he?" And she's like, "He's dead." Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then they just kind of keep going. They do a little bit of back and forth with the flight director with Gerson, but really we get up to a point where they have a medical exam, and then once we hit that point, it's pretty much just funny one-liners, training montage type stuff from there up until the next story beat. But this is where we start getting a lot of funny one-liners.
Yeah.
So they go and meet the doctor, and she's talking about, she's like, "You probably don't remember me, but my father used to be the medical doctor at the base you're on." They're like, "Oh, the goat, yeah, goat. Oh, that's great. Yeah, how's goat doing?" He's been dead for 10 years. And then they're around the corner, and Tommy Lee Jones is like, "You notice how everyone we know seems to be dead all of a sudden?"
Yeah.
So that one's really good. There's a great moment when the doctor first comes in for all of them where all the guys are naked and their backs facing the camera.
Yeah.
And as soon as she walks in, everyone covers their junk except Jerry.
Of course.
Jerry is just grinning at her the whole time. And she even like walks up to him, looks down, looks back up at him, and he's just smiling away. Fucking love Jerry. Yeah, when they're doing the eye test is really funny.
Yeah.
Because they can't just do the eye test. So Hawk goes up, and as he goes up to it, Frank's making a big deal about like getting his watch and like counting when he gets it done.
Yeah, Hawk tells him to time him.
Yeah, and Hawk is just like, Bubba, like, so it's the eye test where you cover one eye and you
Yeah.
read the letters, and he's just like zipping through it, and then finally he's done. He's like, "Ah, yeah." Oh, and he goes to the end. He's like, "Oh, I made in China." Oh, sorry, I read all the way to the end. He's so fucking full of himself. And she's like, "You have 2010 vision," and he's like, "Ah, absolutely." And then Frank tells him the time. So then they swap, and it's the same thing. Hawk's got his watch on. He's like, "Okay, go." He starts going, and he's like, and so at this point, Frank is like reading, blah, 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 and he gets up to a point, he's like, TFZ. And he like uncovers and looks at it, and like, F? And the woman's like, "You have 20/20 vision." He's like, "Oh, okay." And then Jerry goes up. Now, remember, Jerry was wearing glasses earlier, but Jerry's like, "To save time, I'm just going to start with the two last lines." And then he recites them so fucking fast. And she's like, "Very impressive, 20/20 vision." He turns around and he goes, "I may be blind, but my memory is perfect."
Yeah, all in all, also like trying to ask the doctor out on a date while he's doing it.
Oh my
He's,
God,
like,
yes.
asking her about shellfish and
Yeah.
like, oysters.
Oysters are a good aphrodisiac, and it'll be great. I know a great place in Paris I can take you. Like, he is hitting on her hard. There's a moment where they're talking about running outside. One of them's like, "I stopped running when Nixon was president." Fucking great one-liner. There's a really funny moment where they're doing weightlifting, and you see the other two guys that are going up with them, and they're like bench pressing a good bit.
Yeah.
And then they get off and like, "Yeah." And Roger's like, "Okay, you got like 220 in you, old man?" And Hawk's like, "Hell yes, I do." It's like, "Tank, come spot me." And they're making a big deal about, "Come on, you can do it." Yeah, you can fucking tell.
Yeah, Tank's like helping
Tank
him
is the one like basically lifting this by himself. But it's a pretty good bit of weight. And when he like finally racks it, they're like, "Yeah." And Roger's like, okay. And then they turn around to leave, and Hawk's like, "Oh God, that was a little bit more than I thought it was gonna be." And then Tank is like, "I'm gonna go back to my room now and cry."
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are exhausted.
In the midst of this, you also get a scene of the younger corps of astronauts, including Roger and Ethan, sending, what is it?
Ensure
to the guys.
Yeah. And the dude that brings it to them, like the waiter type guy that works there, he's so like nice and kind of enthusiastic about it. So they give them the Ensure, and the guys all like tilted up to them, and they actually crack it and they start drinking it. And I think Tank's like, "Oh, I already drink this." And then Jerry's like, "This is wonderful for your libido."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Bro, can you stop thinking with your dick for 2 seconds, please?"
No,
literally
he
2
cannot.
seconds.
He cannot. But it's a credit to Donald Sutherland as an actor. It doesn't come off as like cringy or anything.
Like he's so genuinely self-assured.
Yeah.
But it never comes off as like almost cocky. He
Yeah.
somehow manages to reel it in just enough that it never goes into douchey territory. And he does. He sells it remarkably well.
Yeah.
There is a scene where, because like honestly, a lot of this is just kind of like one
Yeah.
thing to the next, a little bit of a training montage thing. Hawk and Frank are both in like the G-Force simulation thing,
Yeah.
and they're taking bets on who's going to pass out first. So they're cranking this thing like way past what they should be, and they're like being pushed back, and they're like, "Is this thing even on yet?" I can't tell. It doesn't seem to be moving. And it's funny because like a group of people are watching, and Jerry and Tank are looking and be like, "Oh man, they look 20 years younger. That G-force is really pulling the wrinkles out of them."
Yeah.
And I mean, they are flying around this thing, and then the flight director comes in and shuts it down. He's like, "What are you people doing?" Blah blah blah. And then literally you can see the two guys had both passed out, and they're like starting to wake up, and Frank's like, "Gene, which one of us passed out first?" And then there's a scene where these two guys are running, and they're both running around the same area, and they're both together, and they're like, "All right, race it to the end. Okay, on one, one." So they do this thing where they say like on the count of one. They don't do a countdown. They just say one and go. That does come back later, but it is a very funny thing. We were talking a little bit earlier about the ages of some of these guys.
Yeah.
So even when they filmed this, Tommy Lee Jones was actually in his mid-50s.
Yeah.
Because there's a scene in this where Marcia Gay Harden, her character, comes in and she's trying to find Hawk. And Frank's like, "Oh, well, he's still in there." And she rounds the corner and she immediately was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." So you can tell she just like it's kind of a locker room area.
Yeah.
So you can tell he is in some level of undress. He comes back around the corner with a towel wrapped around him, and dude, he's in pretty damn good shape in this. Like he's not rocking a 6-pack or anything. But they have a little moment, and then he's like, "You know what? I'd like to take you for a beer." And she's like, "After this, I'm gonna need more than one." And then walks away, which is really funny. And then they go out to a bar. So they being the 4 main guys, they go out to a bar. I mean, they get kind of in a little bit of a tussle with a random little townie. And there's this great fucking thing where the guy's like, "I'll put you in the hospital, old man." Fucking Clint Eastwood is like, "I've got Medicare, bud. Go ahead. Give it a shot."
Well, they get into the tussle because they ask a waitress like which one of them she would go home with tonight.
Yeah.
And
it is very funny as well that Hawk manages to talk the one guy out of beating him up, so then they go outside and they think he's like, "Oh, I saved your butt," blah blah blah. As he turns around, Clint Eastwood punched him in the face.
Yeah.
I was like, it's so fucking funny that they get out of the fight with a random person in the bar just to go outside and get in a fight with each other anyway.
Yeah. One other key thing here in the bar with Tank, the scene opens with him doing a crane game.
Oh yeah.
And it's basically just there to show he's really good at sort of thing.
Yeah, he doesn't just grab the toy. It is like the most perfectly around the head pickup of a toy you'll ever see in your life.
Yeah, and that's key to something coming later. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, and Jerry is also in the back dancing with some young woman, charming her as well.
Because of course he is.
Jerry just never stops.
So the big fight between Frank and Hawk is the next big like story beat and character moment, because it's about how it comes out how Frank blames Hawk for never getting to go to space and washing out at NASA.
Yeah.
Because of his joyriding and his grandstanding and his taking all the risks and ruining all the equipment. And Hawk throws that same shade back onto Frank because Frank was never the team player, never worked with everybody as well as everybody else did, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of the key point of this particular scene here.
And then there is, so that is a good moment. There's also a character moment with Hawk and Marcia Gay Harden's character where they're just having a moment and they're talking, and there's this interesting thing with all 4 of these characters. So we don't really know about Tank and his like love life. We know he has grandkids, so we know he has kids. I don't believe he's wearing a wedding ring that I ever noticed, and he never mentions his wife. Then we have kind of on the other end of the spectrum, we've got Jerry, who's trying to bang anything that moves. You've got Frank. I wish it wasn't Frank and Tank. That makes it. I will say, random little side note. So I went to school for music. I played saxophone, and there is a tune that we used to play in jazz band that it was called "Getting Tanked with Frank." And what it was is you would change the name of the tune on whoever played Barry sax on it, because it was a big Barry solo feature thing. And I was the Barry player. And I remember we tried so hard to come up with something like it was like, I swear, I think it was like Getting Rad with Brad or something. It was some stupid fucking. It was so cool fucking tune.
Yeah.
But I love the Frank getting tanked with Frank. It's your fun musical side note for the day.
It's weird to think of a Barry Sachs having a solo.
Oh yeah, man, I got that snipe punt moaning.
Yeah.
I was tearing it up.
Respect it.
Yeah. But then you've got one that is on one end that has grandkids, has kids. I would probably assume either is married or at some point in time has been married. Then you've got Jerry, who's very kind of single, but sort of gets around. Yeah. You've got Frank, who seems to be very happily married, never mentions kids.
Yeah.
And then you've got Hawk, who had the love of his life and lost her. And then when he is in this scene, he's talking to Marcia Gay Harden's character about the love of his life and meeting her. It's a funny story.
Yeah.
That he pushes a when he was younger, there was a situation where he had a crush on this girl.
Yeah.
There was another guy, like a football player he was competing against.
Yeah.
He thought the football player went into a porta potty, so he pushed it down a hill. Wasn't the football player, it was her.
Yeah.
So it's a cute story, but it is interesting that he is with this woman here that clearly they have a thing with each other, but he's still like talking very well about that was the love of my life.
Yeah.
And there's such a sadness to it that I don't know how invested he even would have been in this new relationship when he's like, I had it before and I had because he doesn't just say that was my wife. He says that was the love of my life.
Yeah.
There's just such a sadness to this, man. Even from like Marcia Gay Harden's character standpoint about I have a crush on this person. I want to have a relationship with this person. But he's already been there and done that with someone he refers to as love. Is like, I don't know, maybe I'm just fucking thinking too much about it. But yeah. It's a very melancholy moment.
Even you're right. It's very melancholy.
Yeah. It's a sweet moment.
That's certainly a proper way to read into it, and it is a very sweet and melancholy moment, like you said. I can't say I ever thought about it too much outside of just him telling her about his wife and how they met. And all
yeah, it is a cute, funny story. Yeah. But yeah, so they kiss, and it's it's nice. It's a great moment.
Yeah, they have good chemistry between the two of them.
They do. And I'm glad I looked up his age because I looked it up the other day and there's actually not as big of an age difference between. There's about 13-year age difference between them, which is, a bit of an age gap, but it's not. The movie sometimes almost plays it like it's like a 25-year age difference.
Yeah.
Despite the fact he is the youngest of the four.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they have their thing. And then probably the other like biggest story thing is that they go on fucking Jay Leno.
Oh yeah.
Team Daedalus. And oh my God, there's this really funny thing where it's just Jay Leno just being himself, asking them questions about Team Daedalus and whatnot, blah blah blah. And he's like, so one of you's the womanizer, right? Which one is that? Jerry, is that you? And Jerry like raises his hand a little bit. He's like, so what is it with you? Are you just a horn dog? And he's like, no, it's not me. It's just if women are willing to discover their unlimited number of orgasms or not. And it's such a funny moment, but he says it so just like nonchalantly, and everyone's laughing their asses off.
Yeah.
He does it so well.
Yeah, this is kind of the turning point in that story because up to this point, we found out through another scene throughout this portion of the film that Gerson is assuring the Russian general that he has no intentions of sending Frank and the crew into space.
Yeah.
And that his best guy is training with Frank so that he'll be able to go. That's basically the only thing. Here is where the word has gotten out and the press is gone, so Jay Leno brings them onto the show, and this is kind of what cements the next portion of the story.
Yeah, so then there's a training moment where they're doing underwater training, and Ethan, one of the younger astronauts, he's trying to see what Frank is doing, but he can't see it, so finally he just gets mad and goes up to him, and he's like, how am I supposed to learn if I can't see? And Frank's so dismissive of like, you don't need to learn, Junior. That's what I'm here for. And I can't remember the exact line, but he says something along the lines of like, you're just there for backup or something. And Ethan's like, we'll see about that. He's like, "What do you mean by that?"
Yeah.
And Ethan's just quiet all of a sudden because he let him know a little more than he was supposed to. So then Frank storms into Gerson's room and I think he like slams the laptop down.
Yeah, Gerson's on a video call with someone, and he tells Frank to hold on a second, and Frank just slams the video down, and he was on this phone with the vice president.
Not anymore.
And Frank is irate. He's accusing Gerson of planning to screw him over.
Yeah, sandbagging him the same way he did 40 years ago.
And so they have a big argument about everything, and it comes out that Gerson has no choice now but to send them into space. The vice president insists because this story has made NASA popular in the public eye again. These four elder guys who weren't able to make the cut as astronauts before now are here again. It's a big publicity win.
He does say, though, only 3 of them are going.
Yeah, because if you remember, the deal was 4 of them have to be healthy and pass physicals. And Gerson reveals to Frank here that one of the 4 has cancer in his pancreas and that it's inoperable.
Yeah.
And Frank flips through the paperwork. You see that it's Hawk who has it on his paperwork. And Frank dismisses it and is like, "We're gonna get a second opinion because I don't trust your doctor."
Yeah, and he literally says like, "You would say and do anything to keep us from going to space."
Yeah, and so now Gerson comes back once again with I thought this was about your friend Hawk, but really it's about your spot in space on the space shuttle.
Yeah,
and all that. So once again, that idea of him not being a team player and only being about his opportunity to get into space.
So Frank does ask if Hawk has already been told about the situation, the cancer, and Gerson says he was told this morning. Marcia Gay Harden's character, I like how we just keep calling her Marcia Gay Harden's character.
Let's see what
I'm still going to call her Marcia Gay Harden.
So I shouldn't even bother looking it up.
I mean, I can look it up. Her character's name is Sarah Holland.
There you go, Sarah. Okay.
I didn't know that. But it's funny. So yeah, Marcia Gay Harden. So she's out there and they're having a kind of nice moment, and then she's like, "Is there nothing that can be done?" And he's like, "It's supposedly so advanced, there's nothing they can do." And he's like, and Hawk's like, "I don't even know what a pancreas does other than give you cancer." And you're like, "Fuck, that's a sad line."
Yeah, it comes on the heels of him being like, "I watched my wife go out that way. I'm not gonna."
Yeah, and she's like, "Isn't there some chemo, some treatment, something?" And yeah, he does say, "No, I watched her go through it, and I'm not going out like that."
So
yeah, but then Frank comes out and they have a little bit of, back to back, and he's like, "What would you do, in this situation?" And Hawk's like, "I'd leave your ass behind in a heartbeat."
Yeah,
in a heartbeat.
Because Frank, to his credit, actually makes the gesture like, "I won't go if you can't go."
Yeah.
And Hawk's like, "I'm not going to let you blame me again for not going into space. This is your last chance."
He says this is on you.
Yeah. So
I got to give it to him, though. After this, Frank plays a good hand.
Yeah.
He goes back to Gerson, and he's like, "Cancer, no, he's still past the physical in every other way. You let all of us go, and I will show Ethan everything. I will teach him what he needs to know."
Yeah.
And Gerson says, "Okay." So at that point, we're pretty much on to space.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is, so Ethan and Roger are the 2 guys that go with him. I really like Roger.
Yeah.
He messes them a bit. I just realized we forgot about the baby food thing.
Yeah.
In the cafeteria, once the older guys start getting in the hang of things, and it starts, because it becomes clear pretty early on, these guys know their shit, dude.
Yeah.
Like, they're not just older guys. They're here for a fucking reason.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of times where, we forgot about the fucking landing the brick. Damn it.
Shit. Yeah, that's important.
Shit, it's so fucking hard to talk about the middle part of this movie because it really is like a training montage, and unless you write down the order things happen in, it's hard. So they have a flight simulator that is basically simulating the landing of the shuttle once you get back into I about to say not space. Once you're going to like land on a landing strip.
Yeah.
So it is Ethan and Roger are in the back part of it. They do their first part of it. It's good. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
And then Hawk and Frank are the pilots for their side.
Yeah.
They do it the first time and it doesn't work. And then they're like, I want to simulate a computer failure. And everyone's like, that's not going to happen. And he's like, I want to simulate a computer failure. That's apparently supposed to make it impossible to land this thing.
Yeah.
Hawk does it.
Well, because if you... Sorry, quick tangent, because I'm kind of a space nerd. If you don't know the space shuttle, when it came in on landing, it's just a big brick glider. That's all it is. It just glides in, and you're just using the computer to keep your navigation, keeping you fast so that you can eventually come down and land just like a plane on the tarmac.
Yeah.
So, sorry, brief aside. So they're doing it all right. Roger's the pilot. He's basically Hawk's backup on the entire thing. So he's like, this won't happen. You can't land it that way. You can't treat this like an airplane.
Yeah.
Trying to land it and bring it around and fly it and everything.
Yeah, he says it's not a fighter jet, it's a flying brick.
Yeah.
And Hawk's like, flying brick, I like that.
So they simulate the computer failure. Hawk puts this thing into a near stall trying to come down, and they're like, you can't do this. You're going to stall. Hawk brings that thing down and lands it.
Just perfectly.
And you're like, okay.
That's a big turning point, because that's when all of them are like, oh shit.
Yeah.
They really know what they're doing. So then the next day in the cafeteria, instead of the older guys send all of the young table of people a thing of baby food and then a book of some kind.
I can't remember what the book is.
I don't remember, like Baby's First Space Ride or some shit. And then they like look over the old guys and they're drinking Ensure and they like toast them as they get the fucking baby food.
Yeah.
So it's nice. I do really like Roger. He's got a few nice moments. There's one later on that is one of my favorite ones in the movie.
Yeah.
I really do like the fact that, because it would be very easy to think that Ethan and Roger are both like almost like the bad guys of the crew. I don't think Roger is. There's never any indication that he is.
No, Roger seems to be like truly on board with, hey, these guys got the stuff. They can do this thing.
Yeah. So at this point, we're pretty much up to space.
Yeah.
We're up to the liftoff. There is a nice moment that's two funny lines back to back is so they do like the walk.
Yeah.
And everyone's like yelling and cheering at them. And Frank's wife is off to the side. And as Hawk walks by, she yells at him and she says, Hawk, you bring that man back alive. He goes, nope, that's against my better judgment, Barb.
And Barb gives him kind of a concerned look like,
and then he stops. He's like, I won't let him die. And that's kind of funny. That's a nice moment. And then they get up into the shuttle. And then before they take off, there's another good line where they say, how about a prayer for us, Brother Tank? And Brother Tank says, in the timeless words of Alan Shepard, dear Lord, please don't let us screw this up.
Yeah.
And then all amen. And then we do get the taking off of the shuttle. I think it looks incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, between the practical and the CGI parts of this, you can tell these guys really put some fucking time and effort into all of the liftoff stuff. I think looks fucking great. The ice coming off, the ignition at the bottom, all of it is spot the fuck on. It is so good. Yeah, this movie, you can tell this movie was made by a lot of people who really cared about this movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so fucking good. When they get up, there's a cool thing that I don't know if I've seen this in too many other movies where they've got the multiple different visors in their helmets. I don't know that I've seen that a lot. But they do have like a clear visor that comes down in their helmet, and then they've got a reflective one that's like the yellowish goldish color.
Yeah, the sun visor, basically.
Yeah. So they get up they're in space now. They're up in space, and this is one of the moments I really like with Roger, where Hawk and Frank are kind of having a moment because they're in the front and they're looking at each other and they're in the zero gravity at this point. Roger just fucking like floats up between them and says something about, it only took you 40 years and now you're in space, boys. And they just like put their hand on his head and just push him back to the back of the It's so fucking funny. It's a very cute moment, actually.
But Roger means it in like a respectful way, like, welcome to space, guys. It only took you 40 years.
And then they just like, the way they push him back is so fucking funny. The only other thing that I wanted to mention before we get into the plot stuff in space is that there is a moment when the everyone's like gathered around and they're waiting for the shuttle to take off. The Russian general is clearly kind of nervous about it. And he's like, what's going to happen? And Gerson's like, don't worry, our man is up there with him.
Yeah.
So you definitely know, like
there's something.
Yeah, Ethan's on the up and up.
Yeah.
Just spoiler alert, it's Ethan.
Yeah, if you haven't known by now from watching the movie or listening to us, Ethan's not exactly,
Yeah, and I gotta give it to him. He's not like an evil person.
Yeah, it's not malicious. It's just he's very much trying to do his job.
Yeah.
What he thinks his job is.
Yeah. So yeah, as they're coming up upon Icon, I mean, this thing is fucking massive.
Yeah.
It is so much bigger than a regular communication satellite should be. And the people in the shuttle are questioning why it's so big. The people on the ground, the flight crew are also like, what is this?
Yeah.
So they start getting up close to it, and all of a sudden things on it start activating, and they panic, and they're like, shut down the radar.
Yeah.
And they shut it down, and it stops. And they're like, this thing has like defense mechanisms. What is this? So yeah, then this is when you had mentioned earlier about Tank's crane game.
Yeah.
I will say probably the best CGI in the movie for me is when the top of the shuttle opens and the crane comes out. It looks so good that I'm like, is there a way they did this practically and just green screen the space? Like, it looks so good.
Either that or maybe it's like actual footage from a spaceship.
Oh shit, maybe. It looks ridiculously
we
good.
know they filmed on NASA property, so they probably worked with NASA a good bit on this film, so maybe they got some actual footage.
NASA's like, yo, we got this sick shot. If you can just put this in the movie, we'd appreciate it.
Maybe.
But yeah, he does get it's like a stabilizing crane that latches them to the Icon. The only real issue with it is if Icon goes anywhere, they're fucking going with it. This thing is so much bigger than they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're immediately questioning, like, what is this? Don't know if we've been told all of the full story.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a line we didn't mention earlier where they asked, when it was Gene was asking, if this thing's so big, how did you guys get it up there in the first place? And the Russians, like, there were after effect modifications made to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, they get up to it now, and this thing is just fucking gigantic.
So they latch on, they latch on, and Frank and Jerry suit up to go do a spacewalk up to the satellite.
Yeah.
And this is a nice moment coming up here where Frank gets into his little.
I don't know the name of that thing, but I feel like this is the only movie I've seen
like
that
a
in.
rocket pack.
Yeah, and it's like O2 canisters that maneuver them through space.
Yeah, which is a thing that astronauts actually do have.
I've seen much smaller ones that are almost more like, they look more like they're built into the suit. Theirs is like a platform that they're on.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool.
So Frank flies out and he starts to head towards the satellite, but he takes a moment and he turns himself around and he's just sitting there looking down at the Earth.
Yeah.
And it's a really nice moment of like, finally Frank is here getting to do the thing that he wanted to do.
I mean, the next shot is also hilarious because Jerry comes up like kind of behind him, but comes in upside down from the top of the screen and is like, all right, Frank, we got work to do. And also, just because in this scene I thought about it, so he was wearing his glasses earlier. Yeah. The doctor that he's definitely banging, by the way.
Oh yeah.
She gave him a pair of like prescription sunglasses.
Yeah.
That look really cool, and she's like, "This is so that you can still see up there and whatnot." Yeah. But yeah, so he's like, "All right, we got work to do." So they go up into, because this thing is so fucking big. They go up into the. Is Ethan out there with them too?
I think it's just him and Jerry.
Okay. Yeah, so they're going up to the panel that he thinks he needs to fix, but he looks up and he just sees this giant emptiness inside of it. So he then, using his little platform, goes up and it starts shining a light in it. This is not a communication satellite. This son of a bitch is full of nuclear missiles.
Yeah, this is a nuclear launch site.
Yeah, it is a platform, a freaking in-space nuclear platform, and I think it's got like 6 missiles in it. Yeah.
So Frank calls an immediate abort, and they head back to the space shuttle, and Frank is like, "What the heck is this thing? Why are there Russian nukes on that satellite?"
Yeah, and then we get a little bit of back and forth, and we get a bit more information that the Russians put it up there. It's a relic left over from the Cold War.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why they were panicking about it falling is if it falls to a certain point and loses computer contact, it's going to assume that Russia got fucked, and it's going to launch these fucking missiles at predetermined locations.
Yeah.
So they can't just let it go burn up in the atmosphere. That's not good enough. I will say that Gerson immediately turns on the Russian dude.
Yeah.
They're like, "What is this?" And he's immediately like, "Yeah, what'd you put up there?"
Yeah.
And the look on that Russian dude's face is like, "Bitch, you knew. You helped me do this."
I have no idea what is going on.
Yeah, we do also find out that the reason that Frank's information was used is that a KGB agent stole Gerson's files.
Yeah.
And that's how they got access to the Skylab information, and that is how his guidance system ended up on a KGB satellite or Russian satellite.
Yeah. It was stolen off of Gerson's computer. And so that's why Gerson's been like close with this Russian, just kind of like trying to handle this thing under the radar this whole time.
It's really one of those like, I look bad and you look bad, so we just need to get this solved.
Yeah. Not that it's not that Gerson like gave them the information. They literally
that is good.
Espionage.
I do think that's a smarter point. Otherwise, that makes us absolutely hate him as opposed to maybe just dislike him.
Yeah. So, but up in the space shuttle, once they get back in, they're asking the same questions, and Ethan is like, "It's a communications satellite. Like he's not buying it. He's just trying to do his job because he's Gerson's personal guy."
Yeah.
So while they're doing this conversation, all of a sudden down in Houston, the alarms go off that there's somebody outside the shuttle, and they're like, "Do you guys have an unscheduled spacewalk right now?" And freaking Ethan has just put on his suit, and he's flying up to the satellite trying to just do the job. So he starts to pull the panel off and fix everything.
He fucking says, "I know what I'm doing," and Frank is like, "No, you don't know what you're doing."
Yeah.
The fucking second that little shit plugs into that panel, everything fucking just goes to hell.
Yeah.
This thing has like multiple systems that activate. All sorts of shit just starts going crazy and moving. And again, this thing is so massive that like some panels come off and they hit the shuttle and they're like damaging the shuttle.
Yeah.
Ethan gets clocked. What's kind of funny is there's a giant panel coming towards Ethan and you're like, "Oh my God," the panel misses and you're like, "Oh," but then there's like a tube from it. Boom.
Yeah.
Clocks him right in the face.
Yeah. So Ethan gets knocked out and he's just kind of, I guess he's not floating directly in space. He's like attached and tethered to the satellite.
But it's like pulling taut. Had he not been tethered, he'd be gone.
It's also important to note that during all the madness before they were able to correct everything, Roger had been told to
let's go get Ethan.
To go get Ethan out of the thing before he could screw anything up. And because of the jolt and the panel hitting the shuttle, he ends up hitting his head and gets knocked out.
Yeah.
So it's important for some stuff later on.
Yeah, so basically Ethan doing this took out both of the younger guys.
Yeah. So now Frank, Hawk, and Jerry and Tank all have to figure out what the next move is. How are they going? Because now they can't fix the system, and the space shuttle's damaged.
Yeah, so the shuttle itself is pretty damaged. The computer systems are jacked up. Also, the solar panels on the satellite are gone.
Yeah.
So it can't maintain its orbit anymore. And remember, we said if this thing drops, they're in trouble. So then it becomes a question of, well, what are we going to do? We have to get rid of it now.
Yeah.
So their plan is to use the rockets that are on the actual like missiles, and they're going to use that to launch it out into space somewhere.
Yeah.
The only real issue that they have is the booster rocket is going to be used to get it out into space, but you have to have someone manually on it using O2 modules to help get it there.
Yeah.
Which means someone has to ride these things.
Yeah, because if you don't get it if it goes too short, it'll end up, the gravity will drag it back to Earth.
Yeah.
If it goes too far, it could hit them. Like, there's a lot of different stuff going on.
Yeah, I don't remember the go too far.
Yeah.
I think it was like it had to be navigated well enough that the push from the O2, because I remember him saying, "Give me all the O2 modules you have."
Yeah.
I think it's that extra push had to be
Yeah.
enough to get it out there.
So that the missiles could be launched out into space, and then they could make it to the moon, so that even the satellite won't come back to Earth and crash down. Because even if a satellite comes crashing down to Earth,
Yeah,
like, there's some problems there. So Hawk, being the daredevil that he is, and knowing that he doesn't have a whole lot of time left.
Yeah.
Anyway, because what did they say? Like,
I think like 6 months.
6 months
maybe.
is what he had left. Hawk volunteers himself to strap onto the rocket and try to fly it to the moon.
Yeah.
So
I will say this is kind of nice because it also makes me think of something like Armageddon. Where there's got to be one person. In that, they draw straws. In this case, I mean, he is the best option. Hate to say it that way, but
yeah,
you got one person who's got like 6 to 8 months to live, and everyone else is just old.
yeah.
Yeah, so he gives him the modules. He straps into the rockets. Frank does also get Ethan. He confirms that Ethan is knocked out, but to the best of our knowledge, still alive. Gets him back in the ship, and then, I mean, really from here,
it's not a much. You see,
Hawk activates the rockets.
You see it fly off towards the moon, and then now the question is, number one, will the shuttle, as damaged as it is, survive re-entry?
Yeah.
And then, can they actually successfully land it?
Yeah, there is another really good line here from Gene that when they talk about trying to land manually, Marcia Gay Harden says it's impossible, and Gene says, "Well, it's just never been done before." Yeah. I'm like, "Ooh, fuck, that's a good line."
Yeah, and he actually says that the only two people that would be crazy enough to try it
would
are
be Hawk and Roger.
And Hawk and Roger are both out of commission now.
Yep.
So, and there's a line in there somewhere about how there's like a 20% chance of success with it, and Marcia Gay Harden's character says, "Well, 20% is better than 0."
Yeah.
There's at least a chance.
Yeah.
So, Frank takes the pilot's seat and is going to pilot the thing down. They say they're going to aim for Florida, and they're going to, once they're at a reasonable distance, they're going to bail out, pop the hatch, and everybody else is going to jump out of the shuttle to be recovered.
Yeah.
So they go through re-entry, and for the most part, that is what happens.
They've got Jerry in the back, and this is a funny thing because Jerry is getting Ethan and Roger out, so the two younger guys.
Yeah.
This like metal half circle looking thing comes out, and he hooks them to it and just like yeets them out the fucking. Yeah, you thought I was gonna get it in this one. Just yeets them out the window. When they shows the outside view, it is very clearly people jumping. It's so fucking clearly people jumping. But he gets both of them out, and then at that point, you'd think like Jerry was gonna jump too. Nope. He comes back up into the cockpit, and Frank's like, "What the?" He doesn't say what the fuck. He says, "What are you guys doing? You need to bail out." And they're like, "Nope, we're here with you." And Tank puts his little hula girl up on the thing. It's such a nice moment with the three of them.
Yeah, Frank literally says, "I'm ordering you to get out," and he's like, "We're staying."
Yeah.
So it's nice. It's wonderful.
I will also say there are a few moments in all of this where someone will ask Jerry a question, and he's like, "Let me run the numbers."
Yeah.
Real quick. I do like that there are multiple moments where you see just how smart, particularly Jerry, but a lot of these guys are.
Yeah.
I like that.
So once Jerry and Tank decide to strap in and stick with it, Frank is basically in the same situation that they simulated, where the onboard computers are gone and everything else is going on. Frank puts the shuttle into basically a stall. You actually see
him like
down.
Launch past the fighter jets, and they're like, "Dude, you're going way too fast."
And then he puts it into a stall, and it comes right back where the fighter jets go right past him again. And they're like, he's stalling. So they bring it down. It's still coming in way too hot, so they have the stall going on. And then once they're at a reasonable position, Frank takes a notch out of Hawk's book and is like, "Let's just bring that nose on
Yeah.
Brings the nose down, sets the shuttle down exactly as Hawk would, and we're home, and everything's hunky dory.
And then, do you know what? There is only one like postpartum scene in this. I thought there'd be some big like. No, there ain't shit.
Yeah.
They land. They all kind of have a nice moment, and then it is Frank and his wife looking up in their yard, looking up at the moon, and she's like, "Do you think he made it?" I think he says something like, "I know he did," or "Hope he did," or something.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is that Gerson is immediately playing damage control with the reporters in Houston, because he's like, I knew Frank Corbin could do it from the moment that I met him. He's been a great patriot and astronaut from the moment I knew him, and he's gonna, he's just playing damage control to, and Bob doesn't really get any sort of comeuppance from being a part of the leak, which I guess makes sense because, he's not in control of that necessarily.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So yeah, you get that scene where Frank and his wife are looking up at the moon, and then you go to the moon, and it slowly zooms in on the moon and finds Hawk just laying there on the moon looking out at the Earth. Frank Sinatra playing in the background.
Fly me to the moon. I think incredibly enjoyable movie. I like this movie a lot. This is one that I kind of want to rewatch maybe once or twice a year, pretty consistently.
Yeah.
But I thoroughly enjoy this. Again, I don't think the casting could have done any better.
No, it's a great cast. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the writing is very good. I enjoy the story, love the characters. It's a ridiculously funny movie.
Yeah.
It does have, I mentioned earlier Armageddon. That ending makes me very sad. This one, it is sad, but it doesn't hit the same.
Yeah, it's not like in your face sad.
Yeah.
The same way.
But yeah, thoroughly enjoy this movie. Again, one of the earliest movies I remember ever seeing in theaters.
Yeah.
So if you have seen this movie, I'm very interested when you discovered it, because like we said, not a lot of people seem to have discovered this movie.
Yeah.
Definitely think it's worth a watch.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it before and this episode somehow inspires you to go watch it, then please let us know what you thought. If you agreed with us, if you liked it, if it's like your new favorite movie now, let us know. It's not my new favorite movie.
No,
but
I love it, but not that much.
No.
And in the meantime, I'm Bradley.
And I'm Brendan.
And this has been Storyproof.